Special thanks to Exter for sponsoring this review. The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2. One of my personal favorite Disney animated features is their 1996 musical adaptation of the classic Victor Hugo novel, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. While I do understand the criticisms, like how it grinds the original book down to make it more kid-friendly and how the comedic gargoyles feel out of place for a story like this, Hunchback to me is a case where its strengths are not just good, but arguably some of Disney's best. The animation is beautifully grand, the characters have some unforgettable charm, the soundtrack is powerfully amazing, and even if it's not accurate to the book, it really pushed the envelope by Disney standards to tell a dark story with some serious themes like religion and sexual desires. It may not be the most beloved Disney film, but I consider this about on par with the greats of the Renaissance like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. But if there is one thing that fans like me fear more than Frollo's destructive lust, it's the direct-to-home media sequel. Since the movie was still a commercial hit on its initial release, it resulted in Disney to instinctively go and try to capitalize it even further with a follow-up that went straight to DVD and VHS that had a fraction of the budget and a fraction of the predecessor's appeal. I'll admit that it's been a very long time since I've seen this one, so it will be like I'm rediscovering this movie again. But if there's one thing that I remember the most from my past experience, and from seeing some quick clips when people bring it up, it's that this is definitely not like the first. So now that we're going back to Notre Dame, is there some beauty that can be found on the inside of its not-so-attractive exterior? Or is this all just one butt-ugly sequel? Sorry in advance for this quick little interruption. Now, I know that a lot of you are very much excited to see me smash this movie into smithereens. And trust me, as you could probably tell by the length of this review, I definitely have a lot to say about The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2. However, in order to go and prepare myself, I need to take a bit of a moment before we fully dive into the movie and everything it has to offer, for better or for certainly worse. And what better way for a YouTuber to take a break before really diving into their subject? By talking about their sponsor. What I have here is no ordinary compact little wallet. Sure, it's got some cool features like getting your cards out easily with the push of a button, but the true magic of this wallet is that this has a tracker. Yes, a tracker. So if you ever lose your wallet, you could just go on the app on your phone and it will point to you exactly where it is now. Oh, son of a fish, hold on a sec.
Many minutes later.
Oh, and a pro tip, you could do the reverse and use your tracker to find your phone. And by the way, Exter's having a major Black Friday sale until November 28th where you could save up to 40% off everything they got on the site. Again, thank you Exter for the sponsor. Now, where was I?
But she's even more beautiful on the inside.
Oh yeah, that thing. The story. Considering how this is the grand return of what the New York Times calls the most R-rated G you will ever see, does the sequel continue the predecessor's tradition of presenting mature themes with unforgettably powerful moments? That would be nice, but that's not how things work in the world of direct-to-home media Disney sequels. In the case of Hunchback, the follow-up takes the original and strips away nearly every element that made it unique and meaningful and is now left with just a shell of its former self. A bland kiddie flick where the elements from the Victor Hugo novel is nothing more than just a mask so that it could pretend to be something that it's truly not. So now with Frollo out of the picture and not able to discuss about religion, human corruption, and the complexities of lust, this sequel is all about love. No, not the complications of the subject that weighs in on the psychological pros and cons. Just turn Hunchback into a straightforward, family-friendly rom-com. And, in Disney's mind at the time, what better subject to talk about love since 1, the movie is set in the city of romance, and 2, Its title character, Quasimodo, is still a bachelor. Sounds like the perfect time to give someone a new girlfriend and let the love flourish to make the movie write itself, right? Yeah, too bad this will ruin the whole point of the first movie, though. You see, one of the things that made the first Hunchback of Notre Dame so great, it's how it's one of the extremely rare animated features, let alone one from a mainstream studio, where the main character falls in love, but doesn't win the girl in the end. He still gets a happy ending, but that's because his goal is to achieve social acceptance from not just Esmeralda, but also from the people of Paris. As it presents the realities of romance and how things don't always go the way you think, it has the bravery to express that you don't have to win the girl in order to do the right thing. What I personally hate about Hunchback 2 the most is how it completely retcons that aspect of the first just for the sake of giving Quasi a girlfriend, reducing it to be like any other dumb kids film where they solve all their problems and reward their protagonist with love. This movie destroyed one of the best things about Hunchback! Now I'm going to destroy this movie! With words! And leaving a negative review! And making it look stupid. Look, I can't really do much to lay vengeance on the movie. I'm a YouTuber, not Batman.
Open your mouth. Something will come out.
Nothing came out.
And I have yet to even get into the story itself. It's bad enough that it ruins a key component of the first feature, but it does so in an absolutely lazy and uneventful way. Like I said before, this is nothing more but a typically dull rom-com that follows all the same predictable beats of Quasi and Madeline's relationship over the course of the picture. You'll have your ups, you'll have your downs, but of course, he gets to kiss the girl in the end. Technically, it does try to supply a moral about inner beauty, and of course it's a nice moral to teach, and I'll give it credit that it's not actually overbearing about it to the point of constantly hammering the message onto its audience. It does handle it decently. But then again, that's mostly because it copies how Beauty and the Beast delivered that same message.
Oh, did you find out where the monster keeps his bell? Trinket.
He is not a monster, and I am not your trinket.
If I didn't know better, I'd think you had feelings for this monster.
He's no monster, Gaston. You are.
But the movie can't just have the love be the only thing going on. At the same time, there is also a conflict where people's jewelry is being stolen by the leader of the circus, Sarouche, and plots to steal the most valuable item of Paris, a giant jewel-encrusted bell called La Fidèle. I think it's safe to say that going from Frollo to this egomaniac thief is a major downgrade. It doesn't feel like a problem that is worth an entire movie. It's more like a throwaway plotline made for an episode of a TV show, but extended to an hour and results in being one of the main sources to why this is so boring to watch. There's no intensity, there's nothing to engage to grab audiences' attention, and there's no sense of actual danger compared to before. This doesn't feel like a legitimate story, but rather a checklist of just the basics of a plot without putting in effort of making them feel worthwhile. It really is just taking Disney's Hunchback and reducing it to nothing more than just a lazy kids film. The animation. Maybe this was intentional for the moral, or maybe it's just because the team behind it didn't have enough time or money to properly produce this. But they really are pushing the inner beauty message to the test here. Not necessarily a lot with the story, but that certainly is the case with the animation. I'll just be straightforward here. This is not a good-looking movie. Maybe it's not terrible, but there's no denying that Disney's best animators were not involved with this one. The most that I could say that is positive here is that at least it does try to stay true to the designs of the original. That's definitely no easy task, since the characters have a more realistic look than other Disney films, and the backgrounds are meticulously crafted to capture the complexity of the architecture of Notre Dame Cathedral and the city of Paris during the Renaissance era. I'll give it credit that it does try to recreate that world, and there are times when some of that same feeling of immersion is there when it gives it time to indulge in its environment.
Quasi is wonderful.
But that's where my positivity has to end, because while there are times when it can sometimes look like Hunchback at first glance, trying to bring it to life paints a completely different picture that is not as refined as its predecessor. Yes, the characters are drawn like how they were before, but they certainly don't move like how they used to. Not only is the character animation a lot more limited and takes away a lot of life from what they had previously, but they're also more rubbery. Sure, it's fine to have that style for the comical gargoyles, but it looks really off on the human characters, making them feel less like legitimate people and more like, well, cartoons. Okay, I know that sounds weird since I am talking about a cartoon, but I'm referring to the transition of going from this to something like this. It's just jarring to see this kind of jump from one animation style to another. It's like if they decided to redesign Quasimodo to make him look attractive.
And when you are, you'll find her.
You know, out of all the things that happen in this movie, I never expected to see one of the most cursed images in a Disney film. Now, I know some people could argue that the reason for this animation downgrade is because of the studios behind it, Walt Disney Television Animation and Disney Animation in Japan. The style they provided is no different than what they usually produce for television, so that's gotta explain why the animation sucks, right? Honestly, not really, because this is even subpar by Disney television standards. Even back in the day, they did much better animation that can be respectable to the predecessor. I mean, take a look at The Little Mermaid 2. Yes, that movie sucks as well, but the animation was pretty decent and does genuinely feel like the kind that is meant for a movie than for a TV series. And yet, that was released a year and a half prior to Hunchback 2, so it's hard to find an excuse for it to look like a rushed product. But the biggest consequence that came from this whole downgrade is how it may try to look like the original Hunchback, but has this unappealing part that feels artificial. Yes, I know I noted that as a good thing before, but for the most part, it doesn't have the feeling of that grand scale or the rich use of colors like before, delivering that sense that it's giving its audience a fake version of what they wanted. With the resources it had when making this, there's no way it could ever achieve what the first Hunchback did, and all I can feel is just pity to how it desperately tries to be something that it's obviously not. I'll give it points for trying, but more than the quality itself, the animation is bad for just being a poor imitation. The characters. Of course, most of the characters have returned for this new chapter in Quasi's life, but you know what's shocking to see who also came back? Most of the original actors. Yes, even some of the notably big ones reprised their roles, like Tom Hulce, Jason Alexander, Charles Kimbrough, Jane Withers, Paul Candel, Demi Moore, and Kevin Kline. Not to mention that even the newer additions are quite familiar, like Jennifer Love Hewitt, Michael McKean, and Haley Joel Osment. And even if this is just for a direct-to-home media follow-up, they actually still sound as enthusiastic as they did before by really putting their heart into it. You could tell that they love these characters, and they did what they can to stay true to their personalities. Well, except for Demi Moore, because she sounds like she has better things to do than to be involved with a low-budget Disney sequel.
I see, and it hurts to breathe, but you don't care?
Yes, exactly. What do I do?
Well, you have to tell her how you feel.
But no matter how much effort the actors put into their roles, there's nothing they could do to salvage this movie. The writing and dialogue are so hopeless that no amount of talented voice acting could change that these are still dreadful one-dimensional characters that, like the movie itself, are a hollow shell of their former selves. Quasimodo is the lonely and kind-hearted protagonist that has a chance on love. Phoebus is like the cop of the town who's investigating the mysterious robberies, and the rest of the recurring cast, like Esmeralda and the Gargoyles, Hugo, Victor, and Laverne, are only there to offer quasi-moral support. As for the new additions of the feature, there's Esmeralda and Phoebus' son, Zephyr, who only serves two purposes for the film. One is to show how Quasi is good with kids, and the other is to be a MacGuffin where he later gets kidnapped by the villain. Other than that, there's no other way to describe him than that he's just a boy.
Can I join your circus?
Nice try, kid. If you want to actually be useful, then I recommend to wait until you're older. And in 3D. And wielding a Keyblade. But since Frollo didn't return for the sequel for obvious reasons, the new villain of Hunchback is Sarouche, a devious circus leader who uses his magic act to distract his audience while his troupe robs them blind, and arrived in Paris to try to steal the famous belle, La Fidèle. Like I said before, going from one of the most intimidating Disney villains to a jewel thief like Sarouche is one of the movie's biggest downgrades. The only things that make him a villain are that he's selfish and he steals things, while his personality only revolves around him being a sociopathic narcissist who lies about his own body. Because of having such a weak goal and doing almost nothing to show how he can be a threat, what was supposed to be an intimidating antagonist actually feels rather petty. With him as the conflict, he's the biggest cause to how the plot feels more like an extended episode of a TV show instead of an attention-grabbing feature-length sequel to a Disney movie. And then there's Madeleine. Honestly, I get what the film is trying to do with her. They want her to be like the perfect match for Quasimodo. They made her a bit of an outcast with her quirky and oddball personality, she's a loner with no friends, and for most of her life, she was raised and controlled by the villain.
And who took you in? Looked after you like a true friend?
You did.
Yes.
She does have the materials to be an interesting new character. The only problem is that the movie does absolutely nothing with it. It only presents those aspects for exposition or to fill in time and never use it to actually build her character or have them play a factor to the plot. For the most part, she's just the generic love interest and that's it. I mean, the characters that we all know from before are technically back. But the problem is that they've been given nothing to do. The songs. Trying to be like its predecessor can be a give-or-take situation, at least in the case of Hunchback 2. Sure, there can be some benefits, like with the designs and the voice acting, but when the film doesn't have the same level of craftsmanship like the first, it just makes the failed imitation extra painful because it's trying to achieve something that's just impossible for it to do. That's why, when it comes to the songs, there's a bit of a relief that it doesn't even try to match with the quality of the ones by Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz. Unlike some of the other aspects of this movie, it's almost as if it's self-aware that its songs are terrible. Without counting Jennifer Love Hewitt's song in the credits, I'm Gonna Love You, there are only 4 musical numbers during the whole hour, and each one is more painful to listen to than the last. Each of them play a similar role to certain songs from the last movie, but any of the wit, the lyrical playfulness, the powerful emotion, and the grandiose of the moment is all gone just for the sake of obligation to be like its predecessor without much of the effort. It begins with Le Jour d'Amour, which is like the bells of Notre Dame by establishing the movie's tone and setting that it's all about love.
Le jour d'amour, your song is in the air. What magic will you make for us? What promise will you share?
Next is An Ordinary Miracle, which is like out there to present what Quasimodo wants in this movie.
The ordinary miracle. A common kind of miracle that runs right by.
Then there's I'd Stick With You, which is actually more of its own thing to show the friendship between Quasimodo and Zephyr. And I hate it. It is terrible. It is lazy. It is like if you take friendship from Anything Goes, but replace the fun with cringe.
Just say we're hanging by a rope above an evil witch's brew pot. It's bubbling blue with sticky goo.
But the worst of them all has to be Fa La 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 Fallen in Love, the movie's version of A Guy Like You to present Quasimodo as a lover boy. Even for this movie, it's the most out-of-place love ballad with lyrics that get annoying so quickly that even God himself had to put a stop to this whole song.
He's fallen in love. Sing a rousing, rollicking roundelay for our rip-roaring rhapsody. Quasimodo's fallen in love.
It's like if the songs here have the opposite effect of what the first movie did, where the original made them the highlights of the movie, the sequel made them the worst parts. Why is this movie so bad is a riddle that I don't think anybody can guess if they can. The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2 is undeniably among the worst of Disney's direct-to-home media follow-ups, turning the ambitious and powerful 1996 animated feature into nothing more than a cheap product only meant to capitalize whatever popularity the original may have. It may still have the predecessor's designs and voice actors, but everything else was miserably watered down to the point of leaving us with a dreadfully bland love story, depressingly downgraded animation, overly simplified versions of familiar characters, and lazy songs that make the experience completely irritating. It's a safe bet to say that it's better to just stick with the first Hunchback of Notre Dame, but I'd also like to add that it's better to also watch Beauty and the Beast instead of this. Why? Because that film does a far better job to convey the inner beauty message than this soulless hour waster. No wonder this is often considered to be the bottom of the barrel of Disney sequels. For a movie about love, it makes me feel for this anything but. And that's why I'm giving this the Animat seal of garbage. And Victor Hugo fans thought Disney screwed up the novel with the first movie. Hey guys, this is Animat, and boy am I glad that I managed to finish off the Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, because now I completely do understand why many people actually do say that this is one of, if not the worst of the worst amongst the Disney direct-to-home media sequels. It really is that bad. If there actually is one positive thing that I would give it, in fact, if there is one thing that it actually does better than the first Hunchback of Notre Dame, is actually make the gargoyles Victor Hugo and Laverne feel more in place with this movie, considering that the entire feature is completely dumbed down to their level, or considering how everything is dumbed down, where Victor Hugo and Laverne only got slightly dumbed down, but the rest got really dumbed down. So at the very least, the gargoyles actually do feel more in place with this movie. Alright, but anyways, like I said, I'm glad that it's over. I'm glad I can move on. And speaking of moving on, it is now time that we shall move on to a Patreon request. And this one shall be from Alan Oliva. So, I would like to start off by saying that if you guys would like to be like Alan and you want to go and support my work and get some amazing rewards at the same time, including but not limited to seeing my videos before anyone else, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. But at the same time, if you guys would like to suggest an animated film you would like me to review and I would put onto the animation hat, then all you have to do is write me an email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. So, with that said, what is it that Alan specifically asked me to go and review? So, for this one, Alan actually sent me on a mission. It is a mission that I'll definitely take because anything would be better than what I just witnessed with Hunchback 2, but still a bit of a serious mission nonetheless. A dangerous one that will either leave me with one of two choices: to either be free or to be a pie.
Yuck.
Yeah, yuck.